Today we've got a great petty revenge story about how a no-scent policy goes awry. We'll get into that story in just a bit, but first, sent a sexy message from my boss to a customer. I used to work at a restaurant that functioned as a bar in the evenings. The brunch was always super busy, but the evenings were always dead, and that was my bartending shift. For context, my nickname was $26.50 on account of the fact that one evening I sold $26.50 worth of booze over 6 hours. People rarely came in. Because of this, I was often tasked with doing prep for the brunch rush the next morning. Cracking eggs, peeling potatoes, and of course, roll-ups. For the uninitiated, when you go to a restaurant and they give you your cutlery rolled up in a napkin, that's a roll-up, and someone does hundreds of those by hand. My boss was generally a jerk who seemingly enjoyed tasking me with crappy jobs, toilets and such, and had been a particular prick that evening before he left. The restaurant was small and I knew he'd be slinging brunch the next morning. So in one of the roll-ups, I wrote something along the lines of, "I think you're hot. Would you go out with me? Check 1, yes or no." Then included his phone number, then put it in the pile to go out the next morning during the rush and went home. The next morning, I got a text reading, quote, "You're such a goddamn mother effer. That was awesome, but still, you're a mother effer." Apparently, a couple had walked in and he'd given the roll-up in question to the guy, who was super weirded out and confused, asking if it was for him or his girlfriend. My boss had no concept of what was happening, so he was equally weirded out by this guy handing him this napkin with his own phone number on it. It was apparently amazing. So for a boss that's evidently a jerk, he sure did take this in stride. It was awesome, but you're still a mother effer. I mean, at least he recognizes that it's a joke, and this could have gone so much worse, even though, in my opinion, it's not a huge deal. So yeah, good solid prank. Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these petty revenge videos, it would be so awesome if you left a like or comment down below if you're listening to our podcast. Now that being said, our next story is Karma Will Get You. Years ago, in a small grocery store parking lot in a ski town, I was parked in a spot, and someone parked in a fire lane, perpendicularly behind me, leaving about 3 feet for me to back up. There was no way I could back up and leave. That person happened to leave their car running, so I hopped in and moved it enough so that I could get out. It's bad for the environment to leave your car running, so I turned their car off for them. I also did them a favor of locking their car so that someone else wouldn't just move it like I did. After all, someone else might take it. So I did them the kind favor of locking their car with the keys in it when I left. I'm just amazed at how oblivious some people are and just the superiority complex that some people have, particularly when parking their cars, not even being able to park their car inside the lines. They don't realize, hey, if you straddle the line or you're over, you're essentially taking up 2 spots because no one can park next to you. And in this case, essentially blocking OPN, just totally inconsiderate. So even though this is kind of an extreme bit of revenge, I think it's somewhat warranted. Chris Riley 42 commented, "Too bad you weren't in Canada. We have a program run by a charity, the War Amps, that lets you put a tag on your keychain, and if you ever lose them, anyone who finds them can drop them in the mail and Canada Post will deliver them to you. You could have made sure that their lost keys were returned to them at the speed of snail mail." Our next story is line cutters at a resort hotel breakfast buffet. Until 3 days ago, I was staying at a nice resort hotel in the Philippines. There were a lot of families there from many ethnicities, as the local Cubanos could not afford this hotel. I was in line at the omelet making station when one woman who wasn't in line walks up to the person in front of me and says something in their shared language. "Can I cut behind you? It's a long line." For brigading reasons, I'm not going to say what language it was, but suffice it to say, I speak enough of that language to know what they were doing. I was surprised because, besides me, there were only 4 people behind me and 3 people in front. Anyway, she successfully cuts in. I was thinking of saying something, but instead I got petty. She got to the front of the line and piled up a small plate with the omelet fixing she wanted, and passed the plate to the cook. She cooks it up, no problem. Then it's my turn. As the line cutter's getting her omelet back, she notices that I took the crispy bacon from another station and shredded them behind her, and had it added to my omelet fixings plate. I can see the envy already, but I decide to be pettier. I ask the omelet chef in my politest voice, "May I have some cheese, please?" The line cutter woman's eyes kind of went big when she realized she could have had cheese, which wasn't really an option at the fixin' station, but I'd seen others ask the day before, and bacon on her basic butt omelet. To top it off, at least 2 of the people behind me started ordering the same, from what I saw. I hope it caught on, and the omelet was frickin' delicious. Take that, you line cutter. Love it, nothing hits harder than the pain of buyer's remorse. And her omelet is horribly mid and could have been so much better. That's great. Confident Wish 555 commented, I work with kindergartners, and until this moment I was always annoyed when they tattled about line cutting. I now understand that it's one of those life lesson things that we learn at school. I shouldn't be telling them to work it out. I should be teaching the line cutter that we don't do that here. I think in some countries it's normal to push your way wherever you're going, and lines aren't a thing. It's gotta be a culture shock to be yelled at for doing something that feels normal. Boo Jum responded, the flip side of it is polite queuing culture where people will just queue up patiently and stand there, without knowing why. I've been a total jerk at conventions before by seeing if I could get folks to queue up in random places without knowing why, and they leave. At least 3 separate occasions I've done it, and once I had about 10 folks in a queue, I'd tell them what I'd done. Only had one person give me grief because everyone else realized they got into line without bothering to see what it was for. Our next story is Not So Psychic. Short one. Many years ago, I lived in New York City. One day during rush hour, I was caught up in the throng of people crowding the sidewalk when, out of the blue, a fortune teller ran into the crowd, grabbed my hand and said, "Would you like me to tell your fortune?" For once, I said the right thing at the right time. I blurted out, "If you really were psychic, you'd know the answer to that," and walked on, listening to chortles of laughter bursting out from the people around me. Thinking about it now, 40 years later, it still makes me laugh. Bearded RNY commented, I used to work for a healthcare research company and was in the middle of running a clinical trial for a new medication. Patients were pre-scheduled for each phone interview they were supposed to participate in. Called one of our patients and she answered slightly out of breath. I asked if she was okay and if she wanted to proceed, and she said yes. Then she explained she ran her own business as a psychic and had a customer she was just finishing with. She said she wasn't expecting our call. So not only a psychic, but she had a pre-scheduled call she didn't expect. I had to quickly hit mute because I burst into laughter so hard. Our next story is, Lab demanded I go over my required time to swap my SIM card to Lab's router, so it cost them thousands. Before I start, I should say the manager I mentioned frequently made irrational and uninformed demands of those under them and expected them to be executed immediately with minimal questions. To keep this post shorter, I won't list all the instances I still remember, but just the revenge part. While back, I was working at a lab that only had internet access by cellular router. It was a pretty good connection and allowed for nice uploads, download speeds over the weekends when no one was on it, so people liked to save their data transfers for Friday afternoon. The main lab internet had unlimited data plans, but when all staff were on site, it would be slow and some would complain, especially if people started their data transfers early. In addition to the main connection, some people, such as myself, had a personal line and routers. Mine had an unlimited plan, 3 gigabytes per month, since I was just using it for infrequent remote SSH sessions. It was a Friday afternoon and I was already over my 40 hours, unpaid since salary, so I packed up and was walking out the door. As I walked out the door, a manager demanded I stay to put more/different SIMs into the router to see how data transfers were impacted over the weekend and speeds during the week. I explained that we didn't have unlimited SIMs available, and if we did activate one, it would take time to get a connection. So they said to use the one assigned to me since I wouldn't need it for the weekend, and I can activate a new one to be ready when I come back in. I told them it was an unlimited plan, and before I could explain anything else, they said to just do it. So I activated myself a new one, put the limited plan SIM into the main lab's router, and left for the weekend, knowing there would be large data transfers that weekend. Well, Monday comes and the manager never says anything about it, and neither did I. A few more days pass and they asked me to check out the data usage speeds on the SIM. I gave them the numbers and found out that nearly 2 terabytes of data moved. Almost 700 gigabytes was on that 3 gigabyte limited plan. What they didn't let me explain was that the limited plans have a $10 per gigabyte overage fee. So this demand cost nearly $7,000 in a week. After this, the manager was much more receptive to his underlings' input. I think this is probably a little bit more malicious compliance than petty revenge, but either way, I mean, you knew your stuff, OP, you tried to give them a heads up and warn them, and they insisted that you do it their way, and yeah, $7,000 later, not feeling so froggy about that decision, I don't think. Not Your Nanny commented, I taught my boss to listen to me on subjects I know more about than him when we needed to test a UPS, and he didn't want to go through the, admittedly annoying, process of shutting down the server and taking all the stores offline, and just unplug the power from the wall. Short story, the UPS was indeed bad. The server ended up with a corrupted file system and wouldn't boot. I went out for a nice steak dinner while he had stale donuts and spent 4.5 hours on a restore. Dude, you hired me because I know more than you do about IT stuff. Our next story is, gifting daughter presents meant for husband's side piece. Backstory. Back in 2018, we went on a Christmas trip to see my now ex-husband's, Joe, sister, Jill. He was acting strange and would not talk to me. His sister, whom I only met one time before, ignored me. I was wrapping presents we had sent to Jill and Joe, and Jill went outside for a period. When we went to pack up, Joe was very concerned about his backpack. Only he could touch it. I thought this is odd, but whatever. A month prior to leaving, I found a prepaid card in his wallet. I took it to see what he would say. He asked about it and said it was for work. I found it and gave it back to him. About a week later, I asked if he was having an affair. He said no, and I dropped it. We've not been in love for quite a while, and I knew we were heading towards divorce. Upon return from the trip, something told me to look in his backpack. So while he was showering, I looked and found 2 bracelets in a gift bag. I took the 2 bracelets and hid them. All was well until he went to the car to leave. He came storming in, demanding I give the bracelets back. I simply replied, "What bracelets?" He said he bought them for me for our anniversary next month. He knows I don't wear bracelets and actually hate them. Why would he be freaking out if the bracelets were for me a month later? He stormed out and we didn't talk about it again. I was finally able to get in his phone and discovered text messages confirming the affair. Revenge. 2 years later, we're divorcing. I'm cleaning our rooms, helping him pack. While cleaning, I found the 2 bracelets I had hid years ago and forgot about. I didn't want them, but our child, female 15, loves jewelry. We were separated but decided to have Christmas at the house together. So Christmas morning comes and kids are opening gifts. The look on Joe's face as our daughter opens the bracelets was priceless. They were rose gold, her favorite. Her face was beaming with joy. He sat there looking at the jewelry like a deer in headlights. Edit. Some have strong feelings about gifting bracelets to my daughter and her feelings if she finds out. I have no intention of telling her. Joe will not say anything. He denies the affair completely when talking to other people. He has also since abandoned the kids. He moved out of state without telling them and only contacts them on holidays and birthdays. The only way she would find out is if I would tell her. We stayed married for those 2 years for financial purposes. Yeah, I kind of figured once we did the time skip ahead for 2 years and you were still married in the process of divorcing that you probably stuck together for financial reasons or, for your children. But that's neither here nor there. What is hilarious is, bringing the karma full circle by gifting those bracelets to your daughter, and he can't really say anything about that without outing himself and subsequently revealing the affair. So, yeah, like a coward, he just ran away. Sounds about right. Bee Stinger Boy commented, "The best revenge I've ever read here. It's the 2-year process that makes it so wonderful. And imagining the intensity of burn he felt when he saw, heart pounding in his throat, the bracelets. Plus, he can't mention the humiliation of that moment to anyone, except possibly his guy friends. But of course, he's the fool of that story, so it's unlikely that he'd reveal it to anyone at all. It's your little sweet secret, served up beautifully, shared only by the 2 of you." Our next story is, abusive ex refused to move out, so I did it for her in the most inconvenient way possible. I was inspired to share this after reading the top post today. I had broken up with my ex about a year prior to this event, but she wouldn't move out. One excuse after another for a solid year until one day, amidst yet another argument, she finally admitted her plan was to stay indefinitely and threatened to claim domestic abuse if I did anything about it. That weekend, she decided to go out for one of her weekend vacations with a girlfriend, so I took advantage of the 48 hours I had and got to work reserving a storage unit and rented a moving truck. I worked around the clock loading that truck multiple times, only sleeping a few hours that entire weekend. She had hoarding tendencies that I had long turned a blind eye to. I had to pick my battles, and it had gotten pretty far out of control. Not only did I make dozens of trips, but the storage unit itself was almost too small for it all. It was truly amazing how much crap she had managed to pack floor to ceiling in multiple rooms, closets, and the garage despite living in the same house together for so long. I made sure her laptop was the very first thing in the storage unit, all the way in the back corner, followed by all of her clothes. So many freaking clothes. Then furniture, then all the meaningless hoarded junk. By the time I was done, that storage unit was packed floor to ceiling to the point I had to really Tetris the last couple of loads in there just to get the door shut. She was right at the end of a semester of school and not only needed the laptop first thing next week, she was also planning on leaving for a cross-state road trip to visit family, and everything she needed for that trip was at the very back. From what I heard, it took her and a friend a better part of the week to find that laptop and repack the storage unit. She missed some important deadlines at school and delayed her family trip by a whole week, which messed up other plans and wasted a few PTO days at work to boot. The best part came months later. You see, when she first came back from that little weekend vacation, I had asked her to sign a receipt to receive the key to the storage unit. She immediately refused, threw a fit, tried to steal my dog, failed, tried breaking into my house while I was gone, then came back hours later with about 6 cops in her wake. To this day, I don't know what lies she told them to get that entourage, but after I explained my side of the story, they realized it was just a civil matter and quickly left. The receipt I asked her to sign was simple enough in that I offered to pay for the storage unit for 6 months if she signed it that day. But since she didn't, I removed my card from the account and put the unit in her name. Only problem was, the card she then put on file with them was an authorized user card linked to my account, which I promptly canceled. So then she missed enough payments on the storage unit that they locked her out and she was never able to get the rest of her stuff before they presumably auctioned it all off. Wow, what a mess. So much more entertaining and meticulously planned than just dumping all of her crap in the front lawn. And, it's all self-inflicted. She's acting impulsively, not really planning things out, thinking things through. So, yeah, nice revenge. Dejonda commented, "Great plan. I must ask, how did you get her out when she did finally return, and how did you protect yourself from her wanting to lie about domestic abuse claims? I can't imagine she would back down from her plan to destroy your reputation." Apesoppy responded, "Probably by distracting her with real problems. If you give someone things to sort out, like finding a laptop in the back of a storage locker while under the pressure of looming deadlines, they don't have the energy and headspace to even think about enacting revenge. They're just trying to survive the current hardships and will drop any superfluous things they would otherwise do." Our next story is, are you contagious? About a year and a half ago, I, female, 40, was diagnosed with ocular shingles. I won't recommend. Part of the healing process is the scabbing over of the blisters, which were present on my eyelid, eyebrow, and forehead on one side. In accordance with medical direction, I was not contagious once the scabbing started, and it was about 5 days after the onset of scabbing when the fateful encounter occurred. I woke up that morning like any other morning except for the hideous scabbing. Makeup not recommended. I would not wear a baseball cap to hide my face since the scabs were painful to the touch, and you don't want to touch them because of the threat of scarring if they come off too soon. So I put a hoodie on and hoped that would make me not stand out so much. I kept my head down while shopping in my local grocery store and avoided eye contact and communication. As I'm at the self-checkout line, I hear a voice from behind me yell my name. I turned around so confused that someone recognized me and realized it was my mom's cousin, female, 65, who was the checker on the first check stand next to the self-checkout. Before I could even say hi, she blurts out loudly in front of 10 other people checking out and about 10 more people in line, "I'm surprised to see you here. Aren't you contagious?" I was mortified, but mostly annoyed because I had just started ringing up my cart. I respond, "It's not contagious. Thanks for your concern," and I just turned back around, ignoring whatever she said after. This woman is known for having zero filter and sticks her nose in other people's business on the regular. So then I had people leaving their self-checkouts before they're done and just walking out and leaving their food to avoid me. Other people stared and shook their heads. I finished ringing myself up and left. Fast forward to yesterday. I recently became friends with someone who works with her, and I saw him last night. I decided to tell him a juicy little bit of knowledge that she's embarrassed about and has always been insecure about. She had to have a skin graft on her shin years ago, and they used cadaver foreskin. She used to complain about it because hair never grows on that patch. Yeah, free laser? Her new name is Richard Shin now, and when he asks her about it, he's going to ask if they tested it for STDs and if she's contagious. It's only fair. Yeah, whether intentional or not, like, situational awareness, that's just not something that you yell out in a grocery store. You contagious? I mean, come on, lady. What are we doing? Our next story is mosquito! My father was a physically abusive a-hole my entire life, often beating me with whatever he could reach, including an enamel pot, belts, wooden spoons, sticks, and tent poles, and then mocking me for crying. I left for college at 17 and only went back home when I had nowhere else to go after that. Many years later, in a time frame that I was doing my best to be a good human, he was at my small ranch, in his own trailer, when I had a family reunion. He wanted to ride one of my horses, which I refused as politely as possible. I was showing him my tack room and a mosquito landed on his forehead, so I smacked the crap out of it. The look on his face. I had the little carcass to show him and a riding crop in the other hand. Still makes me laugh. He died from sepsis due to constipation. On his death cert, no lie. So he officially went out full of crap. Okay, let's be honest. Did you really need a mosquito to land on his face to slap him? I feel like we've all done that at least one time where you just like give someone a pot, be like, ooh, sorry, there was a bug on you. I'm doing you a favor, right? That's just like a classic playground prank. But yeah, how about that death cert? Sepsis due to constipation? Eesh. It's such a shame that he flushed his life away like that. Our next story is high school bully regrets decision. I'm 52 and I still think about this moment from high school. I had English class with this entitled preppy a-hole. He was cocky and mean and made fun of my overweight, shy friend in class. He was basically just a prick and sat right in front of me. He was constantly leaning his head back onto my desk and I kept asking him to stop. I told him if he did it one more time, he'd regret it. I had a newly sharpened pencil and I held it tip up on my desk. When he leaned back, he stabbed himself in the head, and just as I said, he instantly learned not to do it again. I realize now that could have been dangerous, but at 17 I didn't think about it. According to people I know in my hometown, he's still a jerk, so it didn't do any permanent damage. It's given me permanent joy though. Yeah, if you're 52 and this happened 35 years ago, there's no way that you were thinking about how dangerous it was at the time. The world's just a different place, you know, you stab people with pencils, lead poisoning, or, strike an artery or something like that. Yeah, whatever. Put a Band-Aid on it, rub some dirt, they'll be okay. I'm just kidding, of course. That's never a good idea to do. Silent Sniper 062 responded, I was the new kid in a class full of jerks. The ringleader threw an eraser from the front of the class at me. I informed him that if he did it again, I wasn't responsible for my actions, nor what was going to happen to him. He took it as an idle threat and threw another one, again. I then picked the eraser up, walked up to him, and as he opened his mouth to say something, I jammed it into his mouth, leaving him gagging on chalk dust. Needless to say, neither he nor his gang ever bothered me again. Screw you, John O'Brien. Here's to hoping life kicked your butt. Many times. Our next story is no scent policy gone awry. I work for a large multinational firm that introduced a no strong scent policy about a year ago to prevent discomfort from strong perfumes and colognes. I'm fine adhering to it. However, there's an administrator in the office who acts as if she's everyone's boss. She's a bit overzealous, like Rolf from The Sound of Music, eager to enforce rules, even unnecessarily. Months after the policy was announced, she started targeting colleagues, including two of my friends, accusing them of violating the scent rule. Her approach annoyed many of us, so a few co-workers and I decided on some harmless revenge, wearing subtle perfumes or colognes when we're in the office a few times a week. It's just for fun, and we'd gladly stop if anyone genuinely felt discomfort, but no one has ever complained, and none of us wear strong scents. So she's gone from 1 or 2 people who wear cologne to about 20. We find the situation amusing. Good old-fashioned, harmless fun, as long as you're not like spraying yourself down with like BO scented aromas or something like that. This is perf, chef's kiss. Great job. Plain Ad 6816 commented, surely getting enough people to say she smells strongly would have more of an impact? Christ, claim she's smelling strongly of a musky cologne and call it a day. Our next story is, first time at a casino. I've never been to a casino before, not a fan of gambling, really. Well, a close friend recently came across a good amount of money and took us, a group of 7, to the casino. He gave each of us $100 and said to do whatever. I only know how to play blackjack, so I sat down at the table. I didn't know all the rules, so the dealer told me about the hand signs, and another lady next to me, also a player, was telling me about the rules. Then this random old man across from the table said, "Don't help them, he loses and we win." I decided to be petty. All while making direct eye contact with him, I give the nice other player $10 in chips and she helped me. A random guy next to her $10 in chips because I was feeling nice. Gave the dealer a random $10 tip. Then I said to the mean old man, quote, "Everyone here at the table gets free chips, but not you. You just get the judgment of being an old prick." The dealer had to turn their face away to show her laughing. He didn't like that least to say. I'm more than happy giving away money that I didn't earn just out of spite, you old crone. Yeah, really nothing else to see here, just a good old-fashioned political backhand, if you will, metaphorically, of course. Our next story is, speeding in a school zone? I'll make sure you're late. I was on my typical morning route when I got to a school zone in my small suburban town. For some context, this road in particular is normally 45 mph normally, and people ignoring the school zone signs and nearly hitting a kid is common because of the combination of the high school starting really early and people trying to rush to get to their jobs in the city. The high school always has groups of runners crossing the too busy intersections along this road, so when I see reckless drivers come so close to these kids, it lights a desire in me for petty revenge. This morning, I was going 20 mph through the school zone with all the other cars doing what they're supposed to, when out of nowhere, a car came speeding by going at least 15 mph above the speed limit. Luckily, this gremlin of a woman got held up at the next intersection in front of me, so I got a good chance to memorize what the car looked like so I can enact my petty revenge. Everything seemed to fall in place for this revenge. I was behind them, they were going the same direction as me towards the city for work, and despite them cutting off people and switching lanes a ton, they never went out of my line of sight, and I end up behind them again as we go onto the highway. As we're getting on the highway, they nearly collide with a truck who's trying to legally merge with a blinker into the freeway ramp just because they don't want to let them in. So it only solidifies this person is worthy of a little petty revenge. Once on the highway, I safely make my way over to the far left lane, and guess who's behind me? The gremlin who likes to speed in school zones so she isn't late. Traffic was going slow except for the far left lane, so I was able to slow down to 5 below the speed limit and still be side to side with all the other cars in traffic. The gremlin was stuck behind me going slow for the next 10 miles while I blast Idiot by Dennis Stephen Wright with the windows down. I left with plenty of time to get to work, so this didn't affect me in the least. The look of anger on her face in the rearview mirror made it all worth it. You know, drivers/people like this in general just need to be made more aware of the disruption that they're causing when they drive like this, when they act like this. I'm of course talking about the target of this post, not OP. But the level of entitlement and pretentiousness, I will never get tired of hearing or seeing stories of people like this kind of getting checked a little bit. So good tale here. Lux Felicity commented, "My partner once tried to phone in someone speeding in a school zone, and the non-emergency person he spoke to said the only way he could tell that person was speeding was if he was also speeding. Reader, he was not. And he told that person that he was at least sure they'd send someone out when a kid was killed due to reckless driving and hung up." Alright guys, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.